whole question of supporting volunteers in the parish. So this is a reference when the synodal process was starting there a few years ago. It was a letter published, or an introductory document anyway, and it very much captured Pope Francis's vision. He was talking about mission, and he says there's three key players in mission in any setting. There's Jesus, there's the crowd, and there's the crew. No, I'm paraphrasing him. He didn't exactly use those words, but I'm paraphrasing him. And this photograph, or this painting, I think captures that. There's Jesus in the boat, and his focus is on the crowd, and his intent is to share some good news with the crowd, but he is supported by the crew. And in one of these instances afterwards, he needed the crew to help with feeding the crowd. So I just want to kind of highlight that emphasis on the three players, that the focus is on mission to the crowd, but in order for Jesus to be able to engage in the mission, he needs a crew. He needs people who will support the mission, people who will engage in ministry on his behalf. So we'll go on then just to look very quickly at what does that mean in today's situation. So this is an image of the typical parish today, and it gives us a sense of the crew and the crowd. At the very centre of the parish, you have that C group, the C circle, and they're the folk who are, in one way or another, taking responsibility for the life of the parish. They do the organising, they do all the different kinds of works. In the past, they were the priests and religious mainly, but that's changing hugely now. But what's in there now are huge numbers of lay people who have energy to engage in some form of ministry or other. That recent mapping exercise that we conducted across the diocese would indicate that there's upwards of 700 groups of people, everything from pastoral councils to liturgy groups to finance committees, choirs, and so on and so forth, who are involved in one way or another in ministry. And they're reaching out to the B group, who are the regular mass goers, but they're reaching out beyond the B group to the A group, who are not regular mass goers, but who will still engage with the parish, with the church around key moments like baptisms and weddings and funerals and month's minds and first communions and confirmations and so on. And one of the things that Francis says very clearly is that the parish isn't just the C group. The parish isn't even just the C group with the B group, with the regular mass goers. The parish is the A's, the B's, and the C's together. And it exists in a wider community of neighbours, and that's the N circle there at the outside. And Francis would say that one of the tasks for the church today is to work with our neighbours, people of other religions and people of no religion, but people of goodwill, towards building a civilization of love. And one of the phrases that I very much like from all of that is the phrase "Blessed are the distant." The A's tend to be more distant from us, but there's a whole perspective, and there's a Father Halleck who has worked with Pope Francis, with Pope Benedict, and with Pope John Paul, and he's written on the situation of parishes today. And he would say that the very distance of the A's from us challenges us to be fresh in our approach, challenges us to find the depth of the gospel and to find the language that communicates the depth of the gospel. And so he speaks about blessed are the distant. Anyway, that's the broad parish scenario, and but in order for things to happen, the C group are critical. The people who volunteer to be part of the different activities in the parish, they're critical. And the whole question of how are the C group like whether it's the liturgy group or the choir or the people who clean the church or the people involved in youth or whoever it is, how are they? And it came across very strongly in the mapping exercise that that the parish pastoral councils recognised, like these are a key resource, and that one of our roles can be to check in with them to see how they're doing, to see can we support them in any way, can we encourage them. And anyway, that's what tonight is about. It's just looking at that question of the Cs that are in the parish, the C groups that are in the parishes, are there ways of supporting them? And we look at a couple of examples of that. So, Pat, we're going to start with you. And
Okay.
does that analysis make sense to you?
Well, it does very much so. Just our parish here has 4 distinct areas: Knocknagree, Shrone, Guinea Willa, and Rathmore. And just as it is for, parishes have a different identity. We'd say a parish at the far end of the pastoral area mightn't know anything that's happening at our end. But equally within the parish, people from the various areas, they're more associated with their own area. And I would think, particularly the one we've been doing quite a lot is, if I was to ask you, name without thinking too much, name 5 important groupings in the parish, and we might mention pastoral council, we might mention various things, but I'd nearly bet the one we might mention is boards of management.
Yeah.
We see them almost outside it. And in reality, if you take a lot of the heavy lifting that's done, very serious stuff altogether, is the boards of management. So one of the things we've done every time, they have a 4-year term. And at the end of the 4-year term, there's new boards coming in. So we always have a meal for the boards of management to say thank you for the folks that have been doing all the work, and say welcome to the folks who haven't, who are just starting. And I think, say in our place, we have, we have 5 schools, and it's nearly 60 people. And in all the years we've had it, there's probably been 1 or 2 apologies because people haven't been able to come, but it's a big thing, and it works really, really well. The other thing I find is that, meetings are great, but for some groups, maybe a meal is a better thing. And I mean a breakfast. Like, I give you an example, is generally Christmas, there's the folks that do the collecting, and there's the folks that do the counting and all that. And we were sort of maybe giving them a voucher or something. And we found there the last few years that it's actually, we used to bring them over to breakfast for the cafe in the morning for the cafe. And I mean, it was only breakfast, but we'd have to be kicked out because Linda said, lads, we have people come for lunch. Would you mind going, And I think you find out just as much about that in terms of folks talking, and maybe, it's a bit like as a family, and we might talk about the kids, and they'd say, oh, what about this and that? But if we're driving them, they're in the back seat, and if you just listen in, you learn an awful lot more. Yeah. And so as well as the formal, I think the informal is very good as well. I mean, even the last night at our pastoral council, they were just throwing around the idea. We were just saying, particularly since COVID, folks haven't had a chance to be together, and they were playing out. They were, just brainstorming again and saying, "Well, I wonder if the idea of a parish social is that old hat now, or is there something we should chance?" And there's various groups. So there's lots of groups. Val is there. Val has a wonderful team doing the crib every year, and it's unbelievable the work they do. So it's hard to maybe develop a little rota of how we do stuff. And I also like one of the suggestions you have there tonight, that of a sort of a prayer gathering for folks. And I think that could be integrated into, a prayer service during some time of the year, Easter or something, where we bring, but again, whether you'd have something social after it is another question, But and as I said, the informal setting, I find you pick up a lot. You hear, do you know what happened this last week? Where you wouldn't get in a meeting,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so generally speaking, you would try and connect in some sort of a celebratory way with your volunteers. Would that
Yeah,
be?
we don't do we've had nights for, I'd say not with enough regularity. There are certain groups who, as I say, do the heavy lifting. We'd always have during Christmas, there are people involved every now and then. There are people involved all the time. We give them a little voucher or something just to say thank you for what they do, and there's sort of things like that. But
Yeah.
I think it's good for us. This gives us a reason to maybe put it out there with the pastoral council and say, okay, is there stuff we could do and should be doing, and
Mm.
how we might do it?
Okay, okay, okay. Can I just go back to the boards of management?
Yes.
That was an evening you mentioned about the morning breakfast. What were you doing with the boards?
The boards was, a board has a 4-year term.
Yeah,
So when they finish, then there's a new board. So there's crossover members.
yeah,
But the amount of stuff that boards of management have to do is just so, so serious. The appointment, when things go wrong, the board have to handle it all. And it's easy sometimes for us to see them as part of the school, but these folks are parishioners nominated by the parish to represent the parish. And because it's heavy lifting, so what we do is we just have a meal for them. And it's a meal in Chalkeasagon, which is nearby, and we bring in caterers, and it's nothing major, but it really works well. And it's just a thank you.
okay.
And it's a thank you for those who've given service, and it's a thank you for those who've made themselves available for a 4-year period,
Yeah,
and it's a
okay.
nice link, and people appreciate it greatly.
Okay, okay. All right, Pat. And you had mentioned there that the Pastoral Council is looking at the concept of a gathering,
Yes.
some sort of a social gathering.
Came up
But
the last night in
yeah,
in, in that, and but we're brainstorming and see where it
brainstorming.
goes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I might just very briefly go over an example of a gathering that I was involved in another parish. Just it's just a simple enough model. Um, And a bit like what you're saying there yourself, in the parish, the folk were fierce busy, all sorts of groups like choirs and Eucharistic ministers and social action groups. They were all very busy, and there wasn't that much communication between them, or it was sometimes hard even to find out what they were at or how they were. So what we tried to do initially was to bring them to meetings, and we'd organize a quarterly kind of review. How was things going? And they no more wanted to come to the meetings. They had enough meetings, and they say that because the turnout was very poor. And we says, what'll we do? And then we thought, gosh, wonder would they come to a party? Would they come to a celebration? Would that be different? And our experience was exactly what you had, that it was, and folk came in big numbers and with a lot of energy and to the gathering. So I'm just going to show you briefly what the gathering looked like. So we kind of constructed the night, and we had the late show format in mind. The idea that there'd be an audience and that there'd be a panel and there'd be some storytelling set in the context of prayer and finishing with a social. So what we did was we started with a welcome and an opening prayer, and I have all those resources there, but they'll all go up online afterwards. And then what we had was the different groups that were invited. We had somebody whom we asked, will you be a spokesperson for that group? And just will you tell stories? How did you get on during the year? Anything exciting happen? And sometimes people would have lost members during the year and so on. But we would, in a kind of a light-hearted way, just try and pick up on the stories that happened to them during the year. And then after the stories, we'd move on to a prayer service, just a simple prayer service that involved a scripture reflection, and it involved an input with some words of affirmation. And again, we have the scripture reflection here. We have the basic words of thank you, and I'll just touch on those in a minute. Then we'll close that with a prayer. And then there was a bit of music and a bit of food. And generally we held it in a hotel, so there was a bar there as well, and people could relax. And folk would stay there for hours. And one of the things I found certainly was that you found out more at that kind of gathering about how folk were than you would have at, umpteen meetings. So that was the model that was used. Jared, do you want to just go down a small bit there too? I'll just touch on the so the scripture reading. One of the ones we used was Jesus feeds the 5,000, and that was the theme there. That should the apostles were saying, "So we've only 5 loaves," but Jesus said, "You have enough. What you have is enough." And then in the input afterwards, if you just say that in the story, Jesus focused clearly on the crowd, wanted compassion for them, and he organizes his close disciples to respond to the crowd. And today, those of us gathered here are those disciples. And so it's just affirming the work that the volunteers do. Okay, Pat, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd just be interested. What do you make of that as a model for gathering groups?
Yeah, I think it has a shape to it. And it worked for you, did it?
Oh, it did, yeah, yeah.
It did, yeah. And it gives it a bit of, I like the idea of folks telling what the others are doing, without it being too much,
Yeah.
because there's people involved in a lot of stuff, and anything that helps people to know what's happening is really, really good. As I said there with Val's, and even all the folks at Christmas, suddenly Christmas stuff comes up in our 4 churches. And I don't think people have any understanding of the amount of work that goes into getting stuff there, and the ideas of stuff and things like that. And even they'd have plenty of stories to tell of moving cribs, and you talk about moving statues, moving cribs. There's trailers required and everything to be done. So anything that tells the story is, I think, good, and I like that idea. And what did you do? Did you have those folks just sitting up in front? The people you said were doing.
Yeah. We had one person acting kind of as the compare, like a Gilly Byrne character. We had a rep from each of the groups, kind of sitting on a panel, and they were swapping stories, and you had the audience around them again, and. The compare was good at that, and it was able to crack jokes and draw the audience in. So to be hopping from the panel to the audience, it was a kind of a fun way of hearing stories. That was the basic idea. It wasn't meant to be heavy or serious. There was nobody giving a speech. There was nobody pontificating. It was just just celebrating the life of the groups.
And I think just the acknowledgement of people is huge. Like someone said, I'm here, and I think that acknowledges that. So I think it's good. It's good. I think it gives a basis, and I think what we're both sort of saying is sometimes the informal you find out an awful lot more. And I think that's worth the try.
Well, I'll ask a question that I think I'll be asked. Did it cost much?
Our outing? No. I mean, because we brought in caterers to it. And I think it cost about €20 a head, or maybe 25 at most. So, but again, for, say, in the case of the boards of management, for folks who do 4 years hard work, and yourself, the schools are hugely important. And the other thing, I think that if you look at where and I'm talking about our parish, every parish, we need to invest more than just bricks and mortar. And I think supporting of ministries in various ways, I think, is as good as anything we do, but conscious of what it is, to mind the budget as well. But I think supporting people is part of the building as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like we found the same, that it wasn't like we went to hotel and we looked for a deal, in terms of getting simple food and having the bar there. So people bought their own drinks. So it wasn't, there was certainly a sense in the parish that it was more than worthwhile, in terms of the amount of hours people were putting in every year and the enjoyment of just coming together and meeting and mixing with each other, like that. A lot of them wouldn't have been aware of the different things that are going on in the parish, the different things that groups are doing. So there was a lovely coming together, and it built a kind of a spirit, a common spirit across all the groups. We're in this together.
Goulding
Sheila.
from Killarney. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. Yeah. I suppose if you're in a big parish, you might have to stagger it over a few nights, or you'd have a lot of talking going on if there was a lot of groups involved.
Yeah.
And I suppose the question I would have, would you have we'll say the groups like AA, NA, GA, all of those represented, or would it be strictly church groups? What do you think?
Yeah, we actually had that issue arose for us, that we were anxious to be as inclusive as possible, but some groups actually didn't want to be saddled with a church identity, even though they would have, some of them would have had their origins in the church, but because they were reaching out to a wider constituency, so we would have invited. And like the parish that I was working in was a big parish, and there was all that fact, there was hundreds of volunteers at the time. So we did have, as you say, we had different nights, and we had nights where for people that were largely involved in social action. Then other nights, like the choirs on their own made up a night, between the different choirs and so on. But yeah, we would have looked at any group that was, I suppose it goes back to something that Pope Francis is saying, that the church shouldn't try to colonize everything that's good in the community, but work with what's good. So that was the spirit anyway, that groups that weren't, strictly speaking, church groups were invited, and some came and some choose not to. You want to come in, Verdi?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very positive way to kind of bring people together. And I agree with Sheila. The larger parishes, maybe it has to be a little bit more structured. But it's like a loose framework that allows you to kind of work on it, that fits whatever situation you're in, whatever size your parish is. And I'm just coming from a meeting that we've had in our parish, where the Parish Pastoral Council wanted to feedback the results of the mapping, the moving forward in whole process. And they wanted to feedback to all the groups that were involved, because one of the things that came up through that was people felt, we don't know exactly what's going on in the parish. We don't know the other groups, and we don't know who's in them or what happens. Yeah. So we had our gathering of all of the groups in the parish, a representative. They just got a very brief spot to share what was happening from their group. And they all took it very seriously and came very well prepared and gave a brief account of what they did. And we had our piece of scripture and a little bit of reflection and a little bit of discussion of how it really energized, I think, all of the groups, and people were delighted to meet. And it also gave the Parish Pastoral Council an opportunity to explain their role and what their role in the parish is. So it's been very positive. And then coming up soon is the social gathering for the groups. It was set the week of the storm going, and it had to be deferred. So we're having that. So to try and fit in all the groups and the social and everything on one evening would be a lot for a large parish. But it's really been very positive. It's very positive follow on from the mapping exercise and your analysis of it, and gave some of that feedback. So yeah, great.
What are you doing for the social gathering, Bernie?
It's a gathering, and like that, caterers come with food, and the talent of the parish should be involved. Musicians, the singers, the storytellers, they'll be involved in it.
Okay, so
I'm
it's
not directly
a
involved
fun
now
evening.
in organising that. The parish
Mhm.
pastor councillor, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, that sounds like there's a lot of thought being put into it. Like if you're bringing together musicians and storytellers and all that, there's some big planning going on, is there?
Well, it's going on for a number of years now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
So yeah, we have some of them would be involved maybe in our choirs and that, some of the musicians and singers and stuff. But we have a great tradition of the music and singing and that and play. To council, and wanted to connect with all the groups. And really, I suppose, Martin, you know, some of the analysis you gave and the role of the parish pastoral council, the overview that they don't have to do everything, but they're in touch with all the other groups and what they do. You know, it's kind of coming from that basis. So yeah, and I wasn't involved in any of that end of it. I was involved in just kind of planning of the program for the night.
What parish are we talking about, Bernie?
St. John's in Tralee.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted just to show you tonight was a planning model, like what Bernie described there in terms of that social. Like there's a lot of work and a lot of folk need to get involved in the work, and in the story that I told, likewise, and that. How is it possible to work together to share out the work? So I'd invite you to have a look at this cartoon, which I hope will speak to you. So there's Jeremy saying, don't worry to his mother. His mother saying, Jeremy, you can't have a party without doing some planning. He says, don't worry, it's no big deal, Mom. I'll do all the work. All you have to do is feed everybody and clean up afterwards. So I think some of us anyway would recognize the reality of that when it comes to planning in any community group, in any parish group, even in the family. So is there a way of working that really shares out the jobs to be done? And I just want to briefly offer you an example of a model that I have certainly found has worked very well with community groups. And the basic concept is that all the elements of the involved in the task are numbered out. They're numbered in sequence. What's the order in which they have to happen, by when does that have to happen, and who is responsible. And even quite large tasks can be summarized that way on a single sheet. And the value of that sheet, you can see there's a column that says, okay, there's bubble one. What's one? Well, there's the tasks party, plan the party. Who's doing that? Jeremy and his mother. By when? The 1st of May. What's bubble two? Is to invite the guests. Who's doing that? It's Jeremy by May the 2nd. And so on. Buying the food, prepare the food, set up the room, host the party, and clean up. Who's doing all those? So that with this kind of recording of the task, everybody can see the whole task. Everybody can see the bit that they have to contribute to the task, and everybody can see whether or not that bit has happened. And yeah, so that's it might be something to think about, and particularly in event planning. That often I've seen in the past, there's one or two people understand the event and all the details are inside their heads, but nobody else has the full picture, and it can be hard then for people to contribute but this model shows everybody the bit that they're doing, how that contributes to the whole.